All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Hustle Harder Show. Thank you for joining us, and I'm very excited to have our guest today who's sitting next to me, Brentin Hess. So we are sitting today in Pasadena, Maryland, which is just outside of Baltimore, and really excited to have an opportunity to get to know you and your business a little bit more. I know you have a lot of things that you are working on, and your business is fairly wide-ranging, so I won't try to paraphrase all that for you. I'll let you kind of give the people a little bit of an understanding of what you're working on.
Thank you. Glad to be here. So as you said, my name is Brentin Hess. I'm 31 years old. I have been in the real estate industry since I was a kid. My parents opened up a Keller Williams franchise, and I ran around those halls, when I was like 10. And eventually grew up in that side of business, but because of that and all the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur and a business owner, I did witness my parents have to work really hard and go through a lot of ups and downs to where I ended up getting I went to college, accounting degree, went and got a W-2 job with Department of Defense, and I was doing accounting with them while trying to find that entrepreneur spirit. So I was working that job, and then I flipped my first house at 21 years old, 10 years ago. And I linked up with somebody at the real estate brokerage, a realtor mentor who had a lot of money and not a lot of time, and was looking for somebody young to be able to hustle and run the materials and meet with the contractors and start up a flipping business. Because as sexy as it is today, it was not that sexy back then. It was kind of this like, how do we do it? There weren't like these podcasts and forums online and such. So they needed a hustler in the field, and I was the guy who had not a lot of money and a lot of time. And so I flipped my first house while working the W-2 job, while finishing my accounting degree at Towson University here locally. And that's how I started flipping my first house. And kind of fast forward 10 years, I've been on my own now for about 7 of those, and so for the most part, and I'll flip 100 houses this year. So happy to take you through that journey of flipping your first house with no money and scaling up to 100 flips in a single year.
Yeah, would love to hear a little bit more about that. And I know flipping is a big part of your business. It may be the majority of your business. I know you also happen to own this commercial building that we're sitting in, and your office is just down the way here in the building as well. How much of your business is commercial today?
So I have this strip mall. It's right outside my neighborhood. I have 3 young kids, a 4th one on the way. I'll have 4 kids, 4 and under, as the 4th one comes. So young family. I'm honored to own like my office building right outside my neighborhood, and like kind of our forever home. So really nice setup here. I just sold a couple other commercial buildings. I'm looking to acquire more, but I also have residential rentals, 30 some units there, small multifamily up to a 6 unit, and then single family. So I got the residential rentals, this commercial stuff, and then I flip a lot of houses, and I run our local investor community that has been monetized, and it's a legitimate business, but also brings businesses and our community of local real estate investors together. So I have that arm as well.
Awesome. And I want to come back to the community part, because I think that's really cool. And we're big believers in especially local communities that all can kind of come together to support one another. But let's back up and would love to kind of hear, your journey, right? I think, at the end of the day, this show is really for real estate investors and folks that are in this industry. And I think you have a great story. So, would love to hear a little bit of the detail on how you went from 1 house to 100 houses, because that's definitely, number one, that's a big jump. But I suspect there's a lot of people listening who, are further back in their journey that would love to be where you're at one day. And always interesting to hear kind of what that journey looks like. And it's not always as sexy as it seems on social media too. So I'm sure there was some challenges and things like that. Take us through some of that stuff.
Yeah, one of my favorite sayings is time makes us look like geniuses, because looking back, it looks like oh
yeah.
So like progressively getting closer to achieving more, but going through really tough times and breaking through a barrier and finding a new barrier and going down. So plenty of depth in between the last 10 years and going from one flip to 100 in a year, with a lot of dark days, sleepless nights, negative bank account balances, lots of student debt, and a failed like partnership and all that, ugly stuff. So that's without saying, I think a lot of us have our challenges throughout our journey. So happy to talk about whatever. But let me start with the first flip that I did for those listeners who are wondering, how do I just get into this business? How do I flip my first house? I do think there's a lot to be said about success leaves clues and following a model. And you could do that by the free education online, or you can pay for somebody's time to show you the ropes. And it doesn't have to be a formal partnership. You could pay somebody to be a coach or a mentor or whatnot. They could be local, they could be nationwide, or you could tap into their resources and their knowledge for free by listening to like podcasts like this. So I do think that there's a lot of information out there, and that's where you want to start. You want to first start with the information, and then you want to just get messy. So you want to go and find that first deal. So like, if my advice is go out and get the first deal, then you got to say, well, how do I know what's a good deal? How do I analyze it? And then your research leads you to the path of learning how to analyze a deal, and then how do I fund it? And then, so on my journey, it takes me to somebody else who had a lot of money. I didn't have any money. I had student debt. So I found a solution to the money problem. And there's plenty of partners, I'm sure, who would do something like that if you want to work really hard for them or work for somebody else who flips houses or so forth. And then in the journey of scaling, there's way more. But I do think that first deal is the most important. It legitimizes you, gives you the confidence, and you got to get over those hurdles of getting there. And like, if you want to go and meet all these contractors, and I think you're not getting the right order of events. You got to go find the deal. Once you have a deal, you'll be forced to figure out the funding. You'll be forced to figure out who's going to do the construction. So if you go meet with contractors, who's to say they're even in business by the time you get your deal? So it's kind of like wasted effort. I would start with going after and finding a deal to get in the game, and then kind of going from there.
So how did you find your first deal? I mean, you mentioned earlier your parents had the Keller Williams brokerage or office here. How did that first deal come up for you?
Yeah, well, it was from another realtor in the brokerage. So I do believe that realtors are a great source of deals. I get a lot of deals from realtors, and I have agreements with them where if they bring me the deal, I'll relist that house with them once it's fixed up and renovated. I'll pay them full commission, and I'll make sure they make commission on the buy. When I go to buy it, either they represent the seller and keep all the commission, or they can represent me and I will pay them commission out of my own pocket. I make sure they're well compensated when I buy it and when I sell it, and therefore they choose me because I think a lot of other investors try to skimp. I want a discounted commission. So, and I try to make it easy. I try to communicate and try to do what I say. So I do think that realtors are a great source of deals, but that's not the only one. You could I get a lot of deals nowadays from wholesalers who go out and source deals directly to sellers and make an assignment fee by selling that to an end buyer who's actually going to flip the house like myself or keep it as a rental. And then I also do my own direct marketing to sellers and go meet them in their living room and work out an agreement with them directly. Okay,
great. Yeah, I was going to ask if you were actually going direct to sellers yourself, and it sounds like that is a part of your business.
It's a part, yeah. It's maybe 20% of my business, probably. Yeah. Not a big piece, but it's a piece.
Awesome. And you said something in there I want to double click on, which is the way that you treat the realtors that are out helping you source deals. How much of your business, first of all, would you say comes from the realtor channel?
Yeah, I'd say 30% probably. I'd say if I had to do like a little pie chart, I'd say 30% from the realtors, 20% direct to seller, another 50% from wholesalers. And that's my current makeup. I do believe that as hard as it might seem to find a deal and to get capital for it, it can be done even in today's market.
Oh, yeah.
as tough as it might seem.
Well, so when you mention kind of the way that you handle realtors and making sure that they're well compensated, I think that's an interesting lesson that a lot of people miss, right? Because to your point, investors, especially ones that are doing a high volume of deals, could see that as leverage, right? Leverage to be able to get their fees down and create a little bit more profit margin. You've not taken that approach, and it sounds like it's really worked for you. I think there's a lot of folks, and we in the money business, we believe you've got to treat your partners really well, because in the good times, that's one thing, right? When things are going great, people are willing to, kind of do what they need to do to get the business, and that's fine. But when times are harder, you might need those people, and they may not be as interested in helping you or going that extra mile for you if you haven't treated them appropriately throughout the process. And it's hard to switch gears once you've developed that relationship. So I think that's a really amazing point that a lot of people probably, don't fully appreciate.
Yeah, a quick story I want to share. I had a contractor at one point in my journey, not my current contractor, who I was beating down on price and trying to take that leverage that I felt like I had and get the cheapest contracting. And he kept agreeing. And what I didn't realize is I bled him dry, and he eventually stole from me. And that was my fault that he ran off with the money and didn't do the work, because I didn't make sure he was profitable. I didn't make sure that his business was running smoothly. I didn't make sure that he was paid appropriately. I was just trying to get him down on price. And I do think it's a strong testament that you got to make sure everybody in your team is winning and winning financially, because if there's a weak link, it'll come back and it will affect you. So at this point, the power shift, I was at one point the big bad investor who was telling the contractor, you work for me, this is the price is going to have to be, you have to figure it out, to nowadays, I do whatever my contractor says. It's the opposite. He has the power. I say hey, how did you do on this job? I realized that it was a lot more work than expected. I don't ever haggle on price. I mean, it's if that's what you need, if that's the price to get the job done and get it done profitably for you, and if I can make that number work, we're good. And even if it still doesn't go super well and there's still hiccups afterwards, I'll say, hey, did you do all right on that one? And if he's like, no, I lost some money, then I'll just send him more money. Because if he's not winning, he won't take my next job. He won't be in the business long enough to scale and grow together. So I think that same goes with the lenders. One of the abilities of scaling is having a great team around you. And I talked about one of the ways that I keep my contractor who does all my work happy and profitable is we make sure that he's winning. And same with my lender. I have direct conversations, been able to scale a lot thanks to Renovo. And with Ryan, we're touching base constantly about, he came to my office, we talked about each other's goals for this upcoming year and how we're going to hit them. And we got to make sure we're both winning. And We're still in this business. No,
I think that's great. Our founder and CEO, Kevin Warner, who you have not had a chance to meet yet, but we'll make sure that happens. But Kevin has a really good story from the business he ran prior to Renovo, also a financing business, and he had warehouse lines and whatnot with the bank, and he was a young CEO at that time, and similar trap that he fell into. Right, he over negotiated his deal with his bank, and felt like at the time that's a big win. Oh man, I got these guys down and was able to get this great rate and cut it as tight as he could possibly cut it, which was good in the short term. But then the market goes through a blip, and in this case it was 2008. And if you over negotiate, you might find that you're not that what's the right word?
Valuable.
Your bank in this case may not see you as a very good customer.
Yeah.
And if they have an opportunity, they're much more likely to walk away from you and leave you in a tough spot versus if you had treated them appropriately in the beginning.
You're not a profitable account.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one example, but I think the way that you treat all the members of of course, your internal team, on your payroll, but also your extended team, your lender, your attorneys and things like that.
Yep.
It really does come into play. And it won't be evident until it's a difficult situation. When you need them the most, that's when it shows up. And that can be very detrimental to your business, right? So I think that's a great lesson and something that, you kind of have to learn by doing, right? And that kind of gets us back to, you started with a flip. You started to grow from there. It sounds like how many deals did it take for you to kind of feel like I got a pretty good handle on this? Like it probably wasn't the first one,
No.
how and maybe you still don't feel that way.
I still don't feel like I have a handle on this. This business is tough. It's a grind. There's a lot of ups and downs in every house and situation. Purchase and sale and realtors are all different. So you're getting a different blend every time. And I find myself learning every day, every transaction. So I'd say the real confidence came out when I started making actual money that made a difference in my personal life, not like on paper. Like I came out hot and heavy with rentals. At one point I had 40-some rental units early on, and on paper they made a lot of money. Like the spreadsheet said like it's a great portfolio. Yet the bank account kept needing cash calls from another bank account. And the other bank account didn't have any money either. So it was like, wow, it's supposed to be making a lot of money, but they're not. So like there wasn't real confidence. It might say like, wow, he's got 40-some units and he's 20, at that point, like maybe 25 years old. It might seem like I had a lot of confidence, but I didn't. It wasn't until making real money that you're seeing it make a real difference in your life. And I do think that that's important to grow strategically, because if the quicker and higher they rise, the quicker they fall. And I can tell you, I almost got taken out of the business by trying to do too much too soon. So I think not being too scared to get that first deal, you do want to go quickly, try to get that first deal. But I do think that maybe you flip your first house and maybe you make nothing and you're like, okay, you don't have the confidence yet, but maybe you flip your next one and make 20. Okay. And next thing you know, maybe a year from there too, you're quitting your job. And then that means the money's real and that means you probably have some confidence. But this whole business is a mind game, a lot of psychology involved, because, I'm trying to read my kids a book, but business is on my mind. Trying to lay in bed, lay on the pillow and business is on the mind. So it's a hustle even when it's not supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I want people to realize like that was the same issue on the first deal and the same issue on the 100th this year.
Totally. Yeah. And social media, right, I think is an interesting factor. It's such a big part of our lives today. Mm-hmm. And was when you were coming up, but also probably not to the same extent. But man, social media is not the best way to kind of judge what's real. Because to your point, you can have a big portfolio and it can look sexy, right? But that may not be the right scoreboard to be looking at. And I think sometimes that's very hard to determine, through the lens of social media. And it takes a little bit of experience to kind of figure out what is the right scoreboard for me to be looking at. And, I think that's something that, is very prevalent, especially in the world of, flipping shows and HGTV and all of that. There's a lot that goes into this. So I'm excited to kind of dig into some of those challenges with you. You started with one. How did your business scale from there? You mentioned you bought quite a few rentals and you went really heavy on the rental side. Yeah. How did that come about and how did you pivot out of that?
Yeah. So I flipped one house the first year, 2 the next with our partner. Then we did like 4 and then we ended up going our separate ways. And then I got really into the rentals and bought a lot in Baltimore City here locally. Thought they were making money. Like I said, they were not. Had to reinvent myself, so to speak, and say, okay, well, I got to figure out how to do this on my own now. And that's kind of where I landed in my relationship that I have now with my contractor, who has way more experience than me, both with his own investments and also with arguably the most difficult part of this whole process, which is construction. And I started taking the back seat, and I started putting on the learning hat rather than the driver's hat. And I was listening to his advice blindly every step of the way, taking my ego, put in the pocket, even though I've been around a little bit and I had modest success and I'd flipped some houses, had some rentals. I kind of like started over and said, can you teach me and you tell me what to do? And that's been like the last 4 years. And in those 4 years, I went from like 12 flips to basically 24 to 42 to 100 in a year.
Wow.
So almost identically doubling year over year. And it's all mostly because of one relationship being a contractor / mentor / friend, and just following somebody smarter than me and their advice on every job. And I still do it to this day.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And one of the interesting things about this business, right, is that it takes a lot of different people all coming together to produce the outcome, right? You need a contractor, you need a good attorney, you need, the insurance guy, and right, there's a lot of people involved. How did you find this contractor that ended up being such a great relationship? Because I think that's such a key, right? Because you could get yourself into a lot of trouble blindly listening to the wrong person, right? So how did you find the right one, and how did you know it was the right relationship or the right partner for you?
Yeah, I mean, so contracting is a sticking point. I mean, as a lender, one of the biggest risks you have is who did they hire as their contractor? Who's doing the work? What's the speed? What's the quality? And I know that a lot of people have their nightmare contractor stories, as do I. I can tell you that if you're looking for a great contractor, the first thing you want to do is you want to find somebody in your local market who is doing well financially. Not the whole smoke and mirrors. Sometimes you can read through that with the Rolexes and the Lambos. You want to find somebody you actually emulate, and you want to figure out who they're using. Odds are one of two things is happening. Either they're using their own in-house guys on their payroll for construction, and that means you probably can't use them. You can't touch them. Or they're using a general contractor who's for hire in the local market. And if the latter is the case, then asking for an introduction could go a long way. And that's it. So how I found my contractor who I've been able to scale with and grow, which no way I could scale without a good contractor. No way. It happened by finding somebody else who was using him locally. And I just messaged him on Facebook. November of 2020. I just said, hey, I heard good things. Like, I got a job. Can we meet? And if somebody's successful like a contractor, they're probably not going to come meet somebody who's never done any jobs at a lunch spot, right? So like the catch is, hey, I have a job. Like I wanted to attract his business. I wanted to get a quote from him. I wanted to work with him. I heard good things, but I waited until I had an actual project to show I'm legit. Let's get started right away, and let's go meet on site, and I'll pay. And I know people have also paid him for his time for consulting. Just be conscientious of people's time. So you want to approach that contractor with a deal or pay them for their time and consulting to help you like estimate a job, but find somebody else who's using them.
Now, did he end up doing the construction on that first project, or did you pay him as a consultant for that one? And
okay, so he ended up doing the job, and he walked in and said, "This is in Baltimore City, one of these ginormous 100-plus-year-old row homes, and it needed to be fully gutted, major renovation." And he walked in there and said, "This would not be a good first job for us. We will." Butt heads because it's a major renovation, and it would take a long time. And I believe you should just let me clean this thing out with all the trash and junk, and throw it back on the MLS and try to sell it for a small little profit, or even just break even and live the fight another day. That was his advice. Like, he came in and told me, I don't want to rehab this thing.
Yeah.
Because he has experience knowing that, like, maybe he would do that if we've worked together previously, but he wants to make sure this relationship works. And like I said, I blindly follow his advice, and I said, okay, even if that means I'm not making money and my spreadsheet says I'm going to make $60,000, $70,000 on this, is going to be life-changing money. I said, okay, I'll throw it back on the MLS. And I think I might have made 10 grand or like something so nominal that it was so tough because it was going to be life-changing money to like barely enough to send a couple more months of mail to homeowners. And I did that. And then I got my next one from a realtor. And I called him out, and it was like this cosmetic rancher, small, 1,200 square foot house in the county. And he's like, all right, now we're talking. So that is how our relationship started. If you don't have a deal to get started, then you do want to say, hey, I'll pay you $500 to come price out this big job for me so I can make an appropriate offer and then use your scope and your pricing for additional offers I'll make. So I do think scoping a massive job and paying them for their time will help you pare that list down to be able to price out smaller jobs in the future. So I think a big job's actually a really good one to start with for consult, but make sure you pay them for their time.
Yeah. No, I love that. And that's really interesting that he came in and basically said, like, I'm sure he wanted to work with you. He certainly was, somebody who probably doesn't turn away revenue on a regular basis, but he had the more long-term vision of what a relationship could be and didn't want to burn it on that first deal. And I think that's an interesting sign. You might be talking to the right guy, right? Because somebody who's thinking more long-term like that, somebody that you can get together with and you can actually build around.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who will come in and, we're in the lending business. There's a lot of lenders who will come in and they'll do that deal. We get it all the time, right? Like, hey, I heard you guys are great. I've got this project and, I've got another lender, but this one has to close in 3 days, so I'll give you guys a shot on this one. And a lot of times we say no to that because it's like, this is not how we want to start a relationship either, right? If we start with this one and it doesn't go well.
That happened with Ryan. The first one I called him on, I was like, this has to close like this Friday. And he's like, not a good one to start our relationship on. And I end up closing on a cash and refinancing. So our first construction hard money loan was a refi because I bought it cash and then the next week refied it so that you guys had the loan on it. So yeah, no, I think making sure you start the relationship off the right foot. So like pay them for their time, or be willing to make sure that they make money somehow on you as a profitable account. I remember when we met at that first job, we walked in there and he looks at me, he's like, all right, what do you want to do? And I looked at him and said, I don't know. What should I do? And I think right then and there he knew, like, okay, I can make money with this guy because he's willing to defer to my expertise on how to run these jobs.
Yeah.
He's not this know-it-all, walk through this and tell me what to do. And I think that's when his mind shifted that I don't care about this one transaction. I care about this being a profitable account. So here's how we're going to have to do this. And I was like, okay.
No, that's fantastic. That's a great story. I think that, and that's probably why, we have a good relationship with you because we think the same way.
Yeah.
And I think, when you find that crossover, that's usually a good sign you're going in the right direction. That's fantastic. So, so before we go too much further, define for me, what is the market? How would you define the market that you focus on for your business? Is that Greater Maryland? Is it more, targeted than that? What does that look like for you?
The market that I invest in is locally here in Maryland. It's mainly the counties, not Baltimore City. So we have Baltimore City and then a bunch of counties that surround Baltimore City. And in Baltimore City, there are a lot older buildings, and there's a lot more headaches and break-ins and theft and challenges and tough resales and longer days on market. So it is not the most desirable place to invest. And a lot of people do. And I think that's one of our challenges locally is the dense place with the most amount of distress is Baltimore City. So like if your local city isn't a great place to invest in real estate, then you're leaving a lot of houses on the table because it's so dense with so much opportunity. And I know there's a lot of people that make a lot of money and do really well in the Baltimore City. So not to say that you can't. But for me personally, I focus in the suburbs, in all the local counties. only in the state of Maryland, and I will dabble in Baltimore City. I'm like let me try a couple. Maybe things have changed. Oh, they haven't.
Yeah.
I'll probably take a little break, and then there's something. So I play that game.
Yeah, and I know it's got to be really tempting because to your point, being in the renovation business, there's a lot of aged housing in an older city like that. So there is a lot of juicy
lot of red tape.
potential deals. But you're right, that typically the bigger the municipality or the bigger the city, the more, kind of bureaucracy you deal with, the more permitting and some of those things that can really, be super challenging. So it makes sense what you're saying. Now, you grew up in this area, correct?
Born and raised in Pasadena, Maryland, which is maybe 20 minutes south of Baltimore City and 20 minutes north of Annapolis.
Got it.
And we're not far from D.C. Where we're sitting here in Pasadena, we're maybe 45 minutes on the middle of the day to get to D.C. So I got a lot of great markets, given that it's Baltimore City, 20 minutes away, Annapolis, 20 minutes away, D.C., 45 minutes away. But I don't find myself investing in those spots. It's really the counties and it's locally. So yeah, I'm born and raised here and I live here and I'll live here forever.
Yeah. Well, and I think that makes a lot of sense too, right? In terms of the focus of your business, right? You grew up in this area, this area extremely well. And, we really like to, we are a local lender. We just happen to be a local lender in a lot of cities.
Yeah.
But each market we treat as its own business, and those markets, Ryan Studner, who runs our office here in the DMV, this is where he lends, so he's able to develop that expertise. But for you live in this area, you grew up in this area, you know it really well. If you lived in Baltimore and you spent all your time in Baltimore City, you might be a little more comfortable, right? Because you're just there every day.
For sure.
But because you're not, you found, the sweet spots where you feel like you can do well and the market well enough to take that risk,
Exactly.
which I think is another thing to think about, like for investors, especially ones that are kind of earlier in their journey, is really thinking or being thoughtful about where you're focused, right? And having focus, number one, I think is a huge thing for developing that early success. Because if you're not focused, your odds are you're not going to be able to be great at any of those things, right? But the more focused you are, the more dialed in you are to the local market, the more capable you are of making the right decisions, which I think is really important. But having that focus and then really, again, being thoughtful about where you're putting the focus, not just, this is maybe the biggest market opportunity, but are you in a position yourself to actually meet that market opportunity and be successful consistently? And I think that's a thought process that people really need to go through, especially early in their journey.
I agree.
Yeah. Awesome. So with your market focus kind of being the county surrounding Baltimore City, what's your view of the market right now? I mean, obviously you're transacting at an incredibly high level, so you're finding opportunities, which is huge. But how do you feel about the market, as we sit here today? And, what are you thinking about as you look, 12 months down the road or what have you? Obviously, we're almost to the end of the year here. It's December when we're recording this. So, looking into 25, how are you expecting the market to behave? And are there any things that you're paying particular attention to?
Yeah, it's a great question. Seasonality always hits you like a ton of bricks. So at the recording of this, we are in the winter. It is slow for resale. Holidays, people aren't sourcing as many deals, so I'm not seeing as many come across my desk as I typically do in emails and texts and calls. So it's more of a grind than ever. A lot of sellers saying, in the new year. But as far as like an actual market, I believe that it's going to continue to be a strong market here. We resell to first-time home buyers. Like most of my flips are in the resell to first-time home buyers. And that market seems to be strong locally. So other than the seasonality blips, I think it's going to be a strong year next year. I have no clue as far as predictions of interest rates or housing pricing, but I can tell you that I follow the same investing advice that most intelligent people share, which is dollar cost averaging. So like you can't really time the market whenever you're investing, whether it's in stocks, you can't time the ups and downs or crypto or whatever. Same with real estate. Like we might have a surge in January for all I know. So if I'm waiting until the spring to load back up, then I will miss that surge. I'll miss opportunity. So I'm just going after whatever I possibly can, trying to be a little conservative on margins, even though I'm a high volume, low margin business. You don't do 100 flips if you're not doing marginal deals here and there to win a competitive situation. So I'm continuing to buy, and I'm not stopping, and I'm being a little bit more conservative because I'm feeling some pain right now on resale. But I do see myself loading back up and having a great spring, and hopefully doing just as many next year. That's the plan. 100 better ones. Because I had some losers this year without question, especially recently towards the end of the year as seasonality kicked in. That marginal deal is no longer good when you have the price drop 10, 20 grand. So at this point, I would like to do another 100 next year in 2025 and make the average per deal more profitable than they were this year, so that there's a better time for money exchange. Well,
you've done a great job of scaling your business, and now now that you've kind of got it where it is now or today, the opportunity to come in and optimize, tinker and improve, your processes and therefore your profit margins and things like that. But that's a privileged place to be, right? I think, just getting to this stage is a huge lift. You mentioned most of your homes are kind of designed or your end buyer that you have in mind going in is a first-time home buyer. Was that a conscious decision, or is that a product of what you see in the market?
We have a great market here as far as fair amount of first-time home buyers and affordable housing. Probably average maybe somewhere around a $400,000 resale on rancher house on a quarter acre in a little first-time home buyer community. It's kind of what we're looking at. A lot of government jobs locally here. So I like to stay focused in that rather than going into the luxury market. I like to stay focused in the cosmetic rehabs rather than going into the new builds and the big jobs. I guess it goes without saying, but you're not flipping 100 houses a year if you're doing full gut renovations.
Yeah, so, for sure.
I like those cosmetic first-time home buyer.
Got it. Love that. Well, I think just, again, being thoughtful and conscious of designing your business in a way that's, going to allow you to do the kind of volume and eventually make the margins you want to make. You mentioned that you are now going direct to seller yourself, right? You've got wholesalers that are obviously doing that to make an assignment fee, but you've kind of built that into your business also. How long have you been doing that, and what led you to the decision to start, going out and trying to source your projects direct, in addition to what you can get from the wholesale community?
I've been doing direct mail for 5 years, not at a super high volume or high rate, like $5,000 a month in mail. It's some targeted lists in neighborhoods I like, and I have dabbled in pay-per-click, pay-per-lead. I think a lot of people have had a lot of success in those. Or search engine optimization with the website. I've done the cold calling thing and the texting. Just never really done well with that stuff. The mail's done okay. I mean, profitable. I do believe that in order to increase your profit margins, you have to increase your marketing to get the bigger deals, because you're not going to get that big home run hit when somebody source that deal themselves and is taking the meat on the bone and leaving you with just enough.
Yeah, they always find a way to price that thing just at a point where you're going to make enough to make it kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, cutting out that assignment fee is obviously profit, right? So for, additional
that's the focus
margin.
Here is how do I do more direct to seller marketing? But I hesitate to even say what I'm going to do, because I don't want to lead anybody astray, because I don't know if it's going to be profitable or going to work. So we'll have to check back in, but I have some initiatives and I'm ready to spend some money. Kind of what happens is you make a fair amount of money and you got to carve a piece of that to reinvest into the business to go get you more deals and better deals. So I'd be remiss to just have a great year financially and then park it aside and just do nothing with it. If I'm going to grow and be more profitable, I got to take a chunk of that and put more into marketing. So I got to do more marketing.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. So, a lot of the real estate investors that I spend a decent amount of time with, many of them who've gotten to your scale, right? They've done the same thing, right? They've developed a division of their business that is, sourcing deals for them. And, that's almost like its own business if depending on the scale that you're operating it at. Do you have a team of transaction coordinators and, lead managers and all of that whole setup? Is that all in-house or do you outsource that?
Yeah, I have an in-house team. I have an assistant. I have somebody running acquisitions. I have a transaction coordinator for all the millions of emails and coordinating. And then I have a handful of virtual assistants who do a variety of tasks ranging from data aggregation to even cold calling. Still, got that faucet dripping.
Yeah,
just dripping.
Yeah, it's amazing how far the virtual assistant world has come. That's been a really fascinating thing for me is seeing how much leverage you can get from some of these VA companies. I mean, there's a lot of them, and they're not all created equal. There's no doubt about that. But if you can find the right one, they really can do quite a bit. And especially in our space, there's a lot of VA companies that are specifically designed for this, right? And they've got somebody in the local country, wherever the team is located, that is training people to do this job, right? To talk to sellers or, whether it's texting or on the phone or emails or whatever. So anyway, for anybody who's interested, there's some really great resources out there, and you can get a lot of leverage from leveraging those VA firms if you can find the right one. So, obviously we talked a little bit about where your business is at today, and you sort of alluded to some of the things you're thinking about going forward, but what is the ultimate goal here for you? Where do you want to take this thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to continue to make more, keep more money every year than I have the previous year, to build the financial security that I need, that I don't have to grind the way I do. I got these young kids, we're a growing family, so my why, so to speak, would be that freedom to, a lot of us can relate, I'm sure, is the freedom to not have to work as hard, not have to put yourself in precarious positions, and to be able to relax and spend more time with the family, coach t-ball, go on family trips, say, screw it, I'm going to spend the day at home. I think I do need some sort of significance in life outside of the home. So I always will find myself doing something that gives me some sort of ego boost, significance of running a business or being a part of community or being an employer to others, to contribute to other people's lives. So I'll always, I'm not looking to retire, but I am looking to not have to work as hard and as many hours as I do now. But right now I have a really good thing going. So I'm just going to give it my all, 110%. My contractor could get hit by a bus tomorrow and the party's over for me. And I got to rebuild, and it wouldn't be the first time. But for now, my future is I'm going to keep flipping as many houses as I possibly can, continue to increase the profit margins, and have a big enough safety net that if I don't want to, I don't have to.
Yeah, no, I love that.
But it's going to be years.
When it comes to next year's goals, and you don't have to get all into the specifics, but you mentioned earlier, doing maybe another 100 houses, but a higher profit margin.
Yeah.
Are you when you think about next year and your goals for your business, is it more unit based, or are you starting to really push your focus to more margin concentration and getting more from the same number?
Yeah, it's a balance, because I'd like more margin, but not at the expense of less volume. I've built up my team to be able to do, let's call it 10 a month. We have the capacity, without me having to hire anybody else right now, to acquire 10 new jobs a month and to sell 10 flips a month. So I'd like to max everybody's capacity and keep everybody busy and keep them well compensated. So I definitely want to focus on that volume. And it's tough. It's a grind to find 10 a month, 100 plus a year. For next year, I have to be more careful of the profit margins in case we run into challenges at the jobs because construction prices are going up. I mean, the cost of everything seems to be going up, so the margins keep getting shrunk. And I take a little bit less risk. So for me, it's a balance. I want to figure out first and foremost, how do I still flip 100? Then, as long as I'm pacing, start saying no to some of those marginal ones or those big rehabs.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my plan. I do have to stay focused on acquisitions. I mean, if you ask me like where my time is, it's acquisitions.
Yeah.
Like I'm behind a computer all day.
Yeah.
All day.
Are you meeting directly with sellers in the house as well?
I have somebody who does acquisitions for me in house. So at this point, he meets with them. I sit behind a computer and orchestrate.
Sure.
And respond. So I'm reactive always, answering that phone because I have problems, across the board, and I got to be available to answer people to help keep them. I got to keep them moving, whether they're employees or a realtor selling one of my flips. I just got to be reactive all day. And the moments where I'm not getting blown up with the phone calls, I'm analyzing deals that come across my plate. Somebody calls me, texts me, I see it in the inbox, and I'm making offers. So that's pretty much what I do all day.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I mean, I say it all the time, but like, a lot of real estate investors, especially at your size, you're kind of a professional firefighter, right? I mean, it's just a never ending stream of things coming up that have, problems that have to be solved and have to be solved kind of like right now. And so, yeah, I can imagine with that many deals, you get chained to your desk pretty easily. But, you mentioned you feel like you have the capacity for 10 a month. If you did 100, that means you got 20% additional capacity, which is great, right?
I could do some more, yeah.
Without having to hire and train and all that stuff. So you've got the room with your current setup, and
yeah. I mean, and Renova is a big part because at this point, just send off the same templated information of here's what's going on, and I don't have to worry about that deal not getting funded. It gets funded. It gets not like so. You kind of train your team. Like we work. I'm sure I'm different. It's different with different customers, but I'm like, here's how I work. Here's how this is going to work with me. Does this work for you? And then we kind of come to an agreement. And then whether we do it once or 10 times that month, it doesn't create any friction. So you want to remove friction from your life. So I know like it's almost like a conveyor line with my contractor at this point, with the amount of jobs we have, with my lender, with the amount of loans we have. Like it's just boop. Send it down the pipe, and you want to remove that friction. So that's a pretty important part of scaling. It's being able to have the duplicatable processes and the team in place to do that. In order to do that, you kind of got to get messy. You got to get like overwhelmed with volume, and then hire the TC, and then figure out a lender who's got more unlimited money, so to speak, and who can continue to grow with you and fund, and find the contractor who can grow with you and has more employees. Like you got to overwhelm the marketplace that you're in, and then find those who can run with you.
Yeah, that's huge, right? I mean, building that extended team is such a big thing, and I appreciate the comments on Renovo, and I know you have a great relationship with Ryan, who's sitting over here listening to our conversation. So no pressure, but I think that's your experience, or at least those comments are very indicative of the goal from our perspective, right? And it is to take as much friction off of our client's plate, because especially you are kind of the ideal client, right? You do a lot of projects, you have a formula, you have specific markets that you focus on, those markets really well, and you know how to execute, and you have a long track record of doing that. So if we can partner with you on some level and with the team that supports Ryan, having that consistency, working with the same people over and over, it allows your team to have a lot more consistency and less unknowns, right? You can be a lot more confident that, hey, I know exactly what the outcome of this will be, unless there's something there's something I missed, right? And I think that's huge. But talking about that extended network, right? I think this is a great segue into the Maryland Investor Network, right? I'd love to talk a little bit more about that. I know that organization's been around for a while. When did you get involved, and what made you decide to get as involved as you are?
Yeah, so we had a Facebook group that grew organically over the last 10 years of local real estate investors or wannabe investors and vendors and contractors and lenders and all that. And it was a very open forum of like, hey, I'm looking for a contractor. And who do you guys recommend? It's like this person, this person. That grew into a very large community. I mean, it's like 26,000 people right now
Wow.
on that group. And it was given to me by a good friend and mentor years ago, about 5 years ago. And it was a lot of work to manage the and keep everything clean and spam free and all that stuff. So a year and a half ago, I said I need to have employees run this Facebook group, as crazy as it sounds. And in order to do that, I have to pay for the employees. So we monetized it in the sense of it's not just a Facebook group at this point, it's a community. So we have events, like 6 events a year. We bring everybody together. We stay involved and communicative on Facebook in the group. And we're matchmaking at this point. We're matchmaking people in our community and real estate investors who need a certain vendor in their life, and we find them and we help say, hey, here's somebody you guys should talk to, and try to bring people together, speed up their journeys. So that's been fulfilling and interesting and newish. And I have employees in that side of the world. But basically, I'm running the local real estate investor community and sort of trying to make sure that we could all make 1 + 1 = 3 somehow. And the plan is to do this in other markets geographically as well, looking forward into 2025.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really cool. I think it's amazing. I mean, in every city, there are a number of these in most cases, very loosely organized groups, communities, what have you, whether it's an online forum of some kind, Facebook or something else, or it's more of a, real estate investor meetup kind of monthly thing. Those things exist, but not all of them are all that well run, and having somebody like yourself who is a big pillar in the real estate investor community locally to lend that experience and that perspective to be able to help build that community and really deliver that value to the community, I think is really cool. And it's not common, not as common as maybe somebody would
It's a game
think.
of relevancy. So I know if I just stopped if I stopped networking 2 years, and probably a year, 2 years, I'd be like irrelevant. I look around the room at all the new faces and be like, well, who are they and how did they get here and what do they do? We got to stay relevant. You got to stay top of mind to people so that they send you the deals.
Mm-hmm.
And you have some sort of credibility. So the self-serving part of that is like when you can bring a community together, it keeps you in the know of who's doing what and who's new and up and coming and who's on their way out. And it allows you to stay like your name in the mix. So I think it's important to have a community locally. It's important if you could be the one in front of the room and running it. And we took it another step where I hired staff and we have this thing dialed in, well-oiled machine where we're running it like a true business and getting people a return on their investment. And we're matchmaking and we have a ton of success stories. So like it's gone to a whole nother level, but you don't even need to take it to that level. If you could just bring people together and be the one in front of the room to interview somebody else, you'll know the people in the room, they'll know you, and you did something good for the community and you stayed relevant. And you might not see an ROI on your time in that moment, but one day somebody will say, yeah, I'm going to send you this deal because I've seen your name everywhere. Or I was at one of your events and I figured, maybe I'll send you this deal. And that one deal could be a flip that makes you $40,000. And you're like, wow, in that moment, I didn't make any money sitting there interviewing them. But looking back on it, I made $40,000.
Yeah.
Maybe times 10.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and especially when you factor in the social media component of that, it always astounds me the reach that some of that has. Like there's investors that I know that are in really kind of esoteric, obscure markets, very small markets that are, you would not normally get a lot of. In their case, they were raising money to fund their flipping business. So they were raising equity from private investors. And, it's not like a market that most people would be like actively like, I want to invest there, especially if they didn't live there already. but they've done an amazing job of like, raising capital from interested investors from all over the country who just see what they're doing online and connect with them through the stories that they're telling and, the different things. So when you factor all that in, it's super interesting. But I think, those communities they're important in every industry, but I think especially in this one, again, back to the comment I made earlier, which is it takes so many different people all working together in some form or fashion to properly execute one of these deals. And so the more you can kind of create a nucleus that brings all of those different people together and helps them connect with each other, man, that's such an amazing value to bring to the community. It's really cool that you do that.
Thank you. Yeah.
And then you mentioned that you monetized it. If you don't mind sharing, like, how did you do that? Is it a subscription, like an annual subscription thing? Do you charge for the events and you take that revenue to pay for the team? How does that work?
Yeah. We charge the vendors for exposure, such as the events and the efforts that we do with our team to help find them, so to speak, like headhunt the right clientele. And to maximize their exposure, do some marketing for them, get their name out in the community. So kind of like a marketing agency, so to speak, directed to the local community for the vendors and to find them the right clientele and have events. And Renovo's been a major supporter of it locally. And Ryan Studner and his team have become a household name. And that is the key to doing well, is having a great reputation and being top of mind and relevant, and that household name is important.
Absolutely. Well, the exposure and the brand awareness is certainly a huge part. Obviously, you've got to execute, or it doesn't go very far. And so that's what we spend our time every day just trying to make sure that we're doing those 1,000 details that it takes to get these things done correctly. Well on a daily basis, but that exposure is huge, and it's kind of cool to hear you explain it like a marketing agency almost. I've not heard that analogy before, but it's a really interesting one and a great value proposition to the vendors that are a part of the community.
Yeah, it wasn't my intent to have a marketing agency. I really want to just flip houses and buy rentals and hopefully retire one day, and then the market has a demand, has a problem, and we went and solved it. But in order to solve it, I needed a team. And in order to pay for a team, I had to charge somebody. So like it kind of found itself into a business.
Oh, I mean, it seems like you've done an awesome job. And that's a value proposition that firms like ourselves and others like us to participate in, right? Because there's a direct transfer of value there. It makes a ton of sense.
And I welcome anybody who's in a position to say, you know what, I would like to do this locally, like where I am. Like we could use something like this. Reach out to me, because I want to help other locations geographically do this. I believe that we have a strong blueprint, and we have back end and team, and at this point, we could take on more markets and work together. And I could show you, here's how this works, here's how it makes it work, and here's how it mutually benefits everybody. So I encourage people to reach out rather than have to go reinvent the wheel, especially in just a couple minutes of vague speaking about monetizing a community and running it. Like, what does that really mean? Just reach out.
Yeah, well, that's an incredibly generous offer, and we'll make sure we put your social media stuff and in the podcast description so people can find you. We attended, you guys had your big end of year event last night, which is one of the reasons I came into town and had an opportunity to sit down with you. But having attended the event, it was probably one of the best run events of its kind that I've been to, and I go to a lot.
Thank you.
Of those. You guys did a great job, and you made it really fun too, which is cool. You did the fun giveaways. I know we, as a sponsor, we gave away a pickleball paddle with the Renovo logo on it. Super fun.
I mean, we had 250 people there. It was like a big wedding.
Yeah.
But like the type of wedding where everybody's eager to get up and get moving and get talking and get networking. So we made sure we had plenty of hours of that, and DJ, music, and photo booths and giveaways. And I mean, we brought hundreds of people together last night, local investors of like wannabe real estate investors to the biggest names in our industry locally to the vendors that keep it working for everybody. It was I was real proud of the team last night. I was looking around, like kind of like on your wedding day, and you're like, wow, like we did it.
Yeah. It was awesome, man. It was really cool. You guys did a great job. Food was great. It was a great group. Very, to your point, very active group, which was neat. I love the calendars that you guys did. Those are really cool.
Yeah, like your Sports Illustrated bikini calendars, but it was our preferred vendor. This is like all of our vendors on the monthly calendar. I mean, you see like Ryan for, I'm gonna guess, March.
Yeah, Studner made an appearance. It's probably the first calendar he's ever been in. Maybe the last, we'll see. But it was really good. And a neat touch, right? Being creative and doing something fun.
My team had done a great job. They deserve a ton of credit, and my team has bandwidth to help others do something similar because we got it down now, I think, and we have other iterations, good stuff planned.
Yeah, that's awesome. It was really cool to be a part of. But I think that's such an interesting part of what you're doing because, and again, kind of circling back to something we talked about earlier was, or maybe it was off camera before we started filming, but you and I were talking about how, you can grow this business and, by all accounts, you are very successful. You built a really nice business, something that you can continue to grow, but, is in a really good place. But with that comes a lot of other things that most people don't think about. And this is, I think, a good example, right? Like you didn't have to take this on. You took it on because, number one, there was a need in the community and you wanted to help fulfill that need and support the investor community in the area. But, there's also a business purpose to that. And to be able to put yourself in the center of all of that happening is I have to imagine has some really nice benefits for your business. But that's one of those kinds of things that if you want to operate at this level, those are the things that you don't think about that might come up and become a bigger part than you would have imagined. So I think it's kind of a cool example of like some of that stuff that might come with the success that also equals more work, more time, more attention away from the core business, which is always, I think, a big struggle for people who are scaling, right? They want to focus on their business, but there's other things that you may have to, in order to support that growth, you may have to do that you didn't expect that might pull some of that focus. And being able to balance all that is tricky. How do you, when you, obviously you have 3 young kids about to be 4, how do you think about work-life balance right now? I mean, I'm sure your kids are really young, but they're going to grow up fast and you're going to have lots of, you mentioned T-ball games and you got a lot of T-ball in your future, I imagine.
I hope so. I mean, I don't have a good solution for it. I struggle a lot with the work-life balance. I could say that it's definitely a constant counterbalance of life where I never feel like I'm in balance. I never feel like I've done exactly what I needed at work and I've shown up exactly the way I need to show up at home. Like that is not. So there'll be days or weeks where it's like I had to give work all I had and I need to now do the things at the home domestically that I mean, I'm home every night. So like, I'm not like some deadbeat father that's not home, but when you start feeling yourself saying, I need to be more present, I need to be home more, I need to go do things, I need to take my kids out of the house just, for a minute. That's usually because you spent too much time at the office. So you're always in this counterbalance of like this pendulum swinging of overcompensation. And I'm like many who quit their 40-hour work week to work 80 hours a week. Like that's just life. And it's a season of life. And I don't want my life to always be like this. But if you look at a lot of the successful people, they all talk about they had the season of hustle.
Yeah.
And your kids could be, you might not have kids during the season of hustle. You might have young kids or you might have mid-age or older kids. You just sometimes never know when that season of hustle comes. But I hope it's like one good 10-year stretch and I'm set for life. That's the plan. And I think I'm in like season 5 of 10 of that stretch.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping like 5 more years and I could not flip another house if I didn't want to. But
sure.
Until then, I have to continue to try to find a balance between home and work the best I can while being in the season of life of hustle.
Yeah, totally. Well, and also thoughtfully designing your business to be able to get you there at some point, right? It doesn't happen overnight, But I think that pendulum is something that we all experience, whether we're W-2 employees or entrepreneurs. Like, I think that's just like you said, it's a part of life, and it is. But, I think it gets amplified when you start to really put a lot more gravity on,
Yeah, you start building some non-negotiables in life. Like, I haven't traveled out of state in a year and a half.
Wow.
And I've had plenty of opportunities, and I just say, like, my non-negotiable is, like, I don't want to leave my kids. Like, at least I know, like, every night, with the exception of events, I'm reading them books, putting them to bed. So you try to find, like, something to tell yourself, like, you are putting in some work and you're showing up when you need to show up. Like, if you have breakfast with them and put them to bed every night, then, if I have a long work day, I got a long work day. So, yeah, I mean, that's where I am with the balance. I have no idea how to balance, but I know that your body and your mind and your subconscious will tell you, like, if you got to double down on one or the other.
Sure,
that's probably the reason why.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a constant struggle, right? Especially for entrepreneurs. And again, the bigger your team gets, the more people rely on you, right? It all builds and builds, and you got to be able to work through that. It's that's why being an entrepreneur is not for everybody, because it's hard. But that's awesome. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to judge you for having a little bit of an off balance time here or there especially in this stage, right? The hustle stage.
And I don't know if these kids will remember, but it's important for them to have a model of hard work.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like your parents, brought you into their world at a young age, which I was fortunate enough to be in a similar situation. My mom was a real estate developer. Growing up, and I was exposed to a lot of that stuff at an early age, and really helped me form, kind of what I wanted to do and what I felt like was success. It sounds like you had that, and you'll be in a position to give that to your kids. Yeah,
and you still want to find a way to carve out your own path so that you reached success in a way on your own accord. I know, like, my parents had never invested in real estate. Great models for hard work. And they've done a great job with their real estate agency brokerage, but they've never, like, flipped a house or anything. So I learned a lot of the intangibles, but the XYZs of flipping a house and investing in real estate, I had to go learn the hard knocks way.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember being hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt after a bad contractor ran off the money, and we didn't check the jobs were being done, and it was just bloody and messy, and that's the kind of stuff they don't teach you in school, or maybe the parents don't teach you, and you just have to kind of go through and build grit and climb out of it. So I do believe that's important to kind of carve out your own path, but you want to be exposed to hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. Having that model is huge. And yeah, there are times where, it's, hey, how do I harvest as much of all this stuff all the seeds that I've planted over all this time. And sometimes the job is just don't die, you have some of these hiccups, and the key is being able to survive them and getting through to the other side.
And I want to add one more thing to having a good team for scaling. I mean, my wife, like, she holds down the fort at home and with those kids, and I never have a second thought of, like, she needs my help, because she's more than capable if I have to run out to a job or an emergency or like. So your team personally, I have a concierge doctor that I can call at any day and time that I pay for his time. I have a health and fitness coach. So I think, like, having a team personally on top of having a really good team, like, professionally, is important, because they're kind of like mixed worlds all the time. Yeah,
that holistic approach. I think that's a really great point to bring up. I'm glad you mentioned it, because I think that's one thing that, again, entrepreneurs who I think by nature sometimes have a hard time finding balance, maybe more so than the average Joe. But also being aware and conscious of, you've got to take care of yourself, right? I mean, if you're going to grind through all this stuff and solve these problems and help build a business that can support all these, employees and things, like, you've got to take care of yourself, and really being thoughtful about that and putting resources into it is really important. I think that's awesome that's something that you do.
Yeah. I try to figure out more and more life hacks on the personal side to make life a little bit easier.
Well, and then that's just part of living too. You gotta go through it and figure out where you need to add or subtract. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like you got a pretty good handle on it, at least as we sit here today. I'm sure you'll get thrown a few curveballs, but it's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I think this has been an awesome conversation, number one. So I appreciate you sharing and, kind of being, providing this transparency into your business. I think, a lot of great things that, I think came out of the conversation. But as we kind of wrap up, a couple of last questions here that I think could be interesting. What is your favorite part of your job?
The people. Like, you surround yourself with the people you want to talk to during the day. Like, I enjoy talking to my employees, my contractor, Ryan, as my lender. Like, I enjoy the people I've surrounded myself with. So those are welcoming phone calls. And I like how we all ships rise with the tide. So as one of us is doing better financially, we all will. And it's no surprise that, like, if I'm doing well financially, the employees are probably, continually incrementally make more money, and then they're doing well. So I like the people that I get to talk to on a given daily basis. I don't necessarily love the product of houses. Like, I don't fall in love with the design of them anymore or anything. I'm so much like spreadsheets at this point in emails and phone calls. But the people keep it interesting and give you something to work for. So
yeah, that's a great answer. The opposite side of that would be, what is your least favorite part of the job?
The transactional side. I mean, we're about to hit January 1st. I felt like I worked really hard to flip 100 houses this year. Like, to find 100 decent looking acquisitions. And January 1st is about to roll around, and my little tracker starts back at 0. And it's demoralizing, all this work you did to have to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
It's a transactional business, and to get out of that rat race, you have to find yourself building a portfolio of rentals for the retirement or the wealth or the passive income side. Maybe just stockpile enough money to where you can invest it with another lender or be a lender. So you got to find a way to train your time for money. And we're in the best industry to do that. You can buy rentals or you can be a lender. That said, the hustle and the transactional side of things is tough, because I wake up, believe it or not, wondering, am I going to be able to hit my goals today, this month? Am I going to find a deal? Well, I go through dry spells too, and I stress about, where's that next deal coming from who, how. I very much worry about, what if I did less deals next year compared to how much money I need to make as my overhead? What if I lose money? So all those thoughts and stuff, and they really hit hard on January 1st when you start back at 0. So I really don't like the transactional side of this business, because it reminds you that every year you got to just hustle.
Yeah.
Can't stand it.
Yeah,
Look forward to not having to do that one day.
Well, and obviously, there are some things you can do to try to reduce that, right? Like building systems, processes, building a team. Building your acquisitions team is a big part of that, right? Because if you're doing enough marketing and you've got a good enough acquisitions team, you can start creating more consistency. It's never going to be perfect, right? But those are things that you're already doing, which are great to help ease some of that. But to your point, I don't think it ever really ends if you're in the flipping business, for sure. You mentioned rentals and building passive income. I know, you have some rentals now. You had a lot of rentals at one point, kind of pivoted away from that, but that was earlier in your journey. How are you thinking about that part of your business going forward?
Yeah, I'm heavily looking to acquire more rentals, especially as I make more active income to help offset some of it, park it, and feel like I'm one step closer to not having to do as many transactional flips as possible. So for me, it's a big focus of mine. Like I said, I have 30 some rental units, and I got this strip mall, and I'm looking to acquire more residential, commercial assets this year while still hitting my flipping active income goal to make sure my rainy day fund is funded. I can fund my rentals. I can fund my employees and my overhead, and had a successful year. So you got to make sure you have active income before you go chase that passive income, because something's got to feed the rentals.
Yeah.
I mean, they're they're expensive.
Yeah, that's a great comment. I think there's a lot of folks who get excited about the idea of owning a big rental portfolio. Number one, being a landlord is really hard. It's not an easy job, but the having the active income to be able to support the passive side, which is really the future, versus kind of the keeping the food going into the the system, if you will, right? The fuel. I think that's super important. But are you when you look at rentals? I mean, sounds like you own quite a few single family assets. Are you looking to stay in a single family? You like that part of it? Or multifamily?
I have a 6-unit locally, and I have a couple 2 units like duplexes, and some row homes, townhomes, and some single family detached, mix of everything and some commercial. I'm open to it all. I spend all day sourcing deals and answering phone calls and emails and texts. So the goal is to be able to see more like rentals come across the plate. So I'd like to acquire a lot more. I mean, I guess if I flipped 100 this year, I bought 10 rentals. So I'm like a 10-to-1 ratio if I flip the rental. And I'd like to see that a lot heavier, like maybe for every 10 flips, I bought 5 rentals. I mean, I think something like really scaling that up to where I can get a full-time employee in-house, because I manage my rentals in-house, but it's like my assistant doing it. So I'd like to get a dedicated employee, but in order to do that, you have to scale your portfolio up to a certain part where it makes sense financially. So for me, that's a big goal of mine. I mean, I don't have any regrets of where I am today. I think it's important. You'll look back and say, man, I wish I would have kept that rental. I would have kept that flip as a rental. You can't think like that because you needed that money in that moment.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to kind of your dollar cost averaging concept, right? You can always second guess these things, but at the end of the day, just kind of, being in the game and keeping those transactions going, you're gonna make some mistakes and you're gonna have some wins. Yeah. Well, listen, I think this has been fantastic. As we wrap up, is there anything that you want to say to the audience? Any call to action in terms of things that you're working on? Obviously, you've got the Maryland Investor Network, which is a big thing. We'd love to give you the platform if there's anything you want to say to the audience.
No, if I could be of help to anybody, whether it's your first flip or you're looking to scale your flipping, I might have something that could help you, whether it's a resource or something on my computer or somebody I know or just some knowledge because I've been through something similar. I'd be happy to help. And same with if you want to run a community in your local market and have it make some money to support a staff, I'd be happy to talk to you about that as well. So feel free to reach out. Anybody can reach out. And the best way is just direct message me on Facebook or Instagram on socials. I'm pretty active that way, or shoot me an email. And my socials are the @ symbol and my first name dash last name. So Brentin Hess on Instagram and Brentin Hess on Facebook. And my email is brentin@brentinhess.com. So it's BRENTIN@BRENTINHESS.com.
Awesome. And we'll put all that in the show notes too, so people can grab it. But yeah, that's incredibly generous of you to offer. I know you're a very busy guy, so that's a very nice offer to help. But obviously, this is a big part of who you are and what you're about, right? This whole connecting thing and the community. So I think that's amazing. So thank you for number one, for spending some time with us today and talking through your story. I think it's been really cool to hear. And thank you for all the things you're doing for the Maryland investor community. I mean, it's really impressive what you guys will put together with the network. And, like I said, with the event last night, I think you guys are onto something and doing it really well. So congratulations on all that hard work. And
thank you.
We look forward to maybe doing this again, and we can maybe catch up with you in a year and see how the business is going and what new challenges you've run across at that point.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. I had a pleasure speaking, and I appreciate all that you all do to make my life just that much easier, and the ability to scale with a lender like Renovo has been incredibly important to my business. And I look forward to this new year, and I hope everybody has a great year.
Thanks so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.